Welcome to the Healers Café, conversations on health and healing with Manon Bolliger, a retired and deregistered naturopathic physician with 30 plus years of experience. Here you will discover engaging and informative conversations between experienced healers, covering all aspects of healing, the personal journey, the journey of the practitioner, and the amazing possibilities for our own body and spirit.
So welcome to the Healers Café. And today I'm with Lesley Nase. And let me tell you a little bit about her. She is the creator and CEO of Intuitive Animal Communication and Healing. She hosts a TV show called Books, Yarns, and Tales, which is featured on Win-Win Woman TV, Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. She's also a public speaker, intuitive healing coach, and a children's author who paints the world. And there's a lot more, but I'm just going to welcome you and ask you, Lesley, when was the first time that you really felt like compelled to go forward in the work that you do? And you can define the work in any which way you please.
Wow, when was the first time? When you asked me that, I went right back being a child about, I think I was like 5.5, 6 years old. And we had moved into a new, huge 3-story old house here in the States. And my brother had been next door with the neighbors, came back with the scrawny little tortoiseshell kitten who grew up into this beautiful cat. And at the time, she was not spayed. She had many litters over the years for many different reasons. But her first litter of kittens, and I should back up and say that we had a special bond. She was always with me, following me. She spent the nights in my bed and in my room, and I would follow her outside. What was she looking at? What was going on? And her first litter of kittens happened to be on the end of my bed. And I was so excited. I'd never seen anything like that before. And it was that lifelong love of cats and dogs and even a goat and horses and rabbits and just other animals as I grew up in the countryside, and my connection to Mother Nature as well. So if you fast forward years from that, I had always been so curious. I was looking at different healing modalities and wondering what was going to fit, what felt right to me in experiences. And in the short, it's a longer story, but in the short, I met 2 wonderful people who were shamanic teachers. And that's like a medicine man or a medicine woman is the easiest way to describe that. They happened to live in my area, and they were having a kind of like this open house at a local little college where the female taught. I got down there, walked into the room late, but just as they were doing what's called journey work, a type of meditation that was taking you on a guided journey in the shamanic tradition. And it was like coming home. I just knew that was the right path and the right direction for me. And things evolved and opened because it almost felt like safe. You don't always go out and tell the work that you do. You're thought of as a little bit different. And then the other way, it felt safe to explore everything I'd either heard about or wanted to know more about and really experience it. And it's always brought me such joy to be able to develop those natural talents and abilities that not only I have, but I believe everyone has, and especially your intuition.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting that it brought safety. That was the word you chose. It's interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, safety was, I think it's twofold. I grew up at a time that you didn't really talk about things that went bump in the night. So if
Right.
you saw a spirit in your room in the old house where I lived, you didn't necessarily talk about it.
Fair enough.
If you woke up, and this did happen to me, and as a child, I felt like a hollow bone, and I couldn't figure this out. What was that about? Those are all signs and symptoms of things. If you have other experiences where you walk into the church and you're watching, you're not listening perhaps to the words of the prayer, but you're watching the energy, and the energy of prayers was fascinating as a child for me. I got excited about that, but it wasn't in that way. It wasn't a safe place to really talk about it.
Mhm.
And on the other hand, what the shamanic course and the shamanic world has done is given me safety, which I think a lot of people don't feel in their own life. They don't feel safe. If I open up into my intuitive, divine inner knowledge, what's going to happen?
Mhm.
How does knowing I have guardian angels or the ability of a psychic ability, let's say, how does that change my life? And that's pretty scary because we all feel scared stepping into the unknown. And yet in the shamanic world, there are a lot of times that I step into darkness, total darkness. And that total darkness felt safe and comfortable. And I knew that all I had to ask was for the light. Show me the way. And that's what I mean about safety.
No, well, that actually you're bringing up exactly the the juxtaposition that often happens, right? When you're starting
Mhm.
something brand new, or it's a brand new world, but there's also the knowing part
Yeah.
that is actually our safest place, which
Yeah.
is it's interesting. So, um, okay, I'm going to just jump to this because it's top of my mind. What's the biggest misconception that you've come across from people that have asked you to work with them about animal healing? And there could be three or four. Like, if feel free to. I just want to see, what do because people have ideas about it.
They do. We all have preconceived notions. And animal communicators have been around for years and years and years, from horse whisperers to pet psychics to everything. The biggest miscommunication, though, that I come across is that when I say that I work with pet people or business people who are pet people, they think and they tune in to that word pet. That's what I work with, which is not true. They forget that people part because we live in a world, as quantum physics will tell us, that we're entangled. When we live with other people, when we live with animals, when we live with the nature outside, that all plays into our own energy fields. And that entanglement is there. So it's kind of like finding the music and the rhythm to something. But quantum physics also tells us about mirror imaging. And this is what another part that people just don't quite understand yet is that what's going on with their pet is often being mirrored in them. I can't tell you how many people I will say, I said, do you have stomach issues? Well, yeah, so does your pet. Are you feeling anxiety, especially around leaving your pet? Yeah, I don't. I work from home now so that I don't have to leave them. Or I set the rule that I'm only away 3 hours, one client tells me. And part of that is that anxiety of leaving a beloved pet home by themselves. The anxiety in the person is often leaving the home and going out. But their anxiety is mirrored by their pet. And so when you start to understand the relationship between the two, the healing is for both. So sometimes I have healing work that is just with the pet, and I'll mention to the person who hasn't thought about that aspect, how entangled they are with their pet, that perhaps you also need a healing session, and let's get to the root of your imbalances, of your health and wellness and well-being. And so those are the biggest misconceptions, I would say, that people have.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because even on the most superficial level, and I had this as a child, or whenever I saw what is it, 101 Dalmatians,
Mm-hmm.
you see the owners walking like their pet. There's so much, and the pet looks like their owners, right? And eventually,
Absolutely.
even in couples, if they've been around each other long enough, there's similarities.
Right.
But I would think it's very interesting in when I worked as a naturopath, in homeopathy, I would, because I'm not a vet and there's all these regulations,
Right.
probably much more regulated, but I couldn't treat animals. So they booked an appointment for themselves, but brought their animal. and that's how I discovered like so much similarity.
Right.
It's quite uncanny anyway. So I could see it would really benefit. It depends on the connection, I think, too. I don't know.
Well, it does and it doesn't. There are threads that move through there, and some people, I mean, that's amazing that you're talking about that they'd book for themselves and then bring their animal, their pet along, because so many people understand that there is something more than the allopathic medicine, that they've always believed in. And don't get me wrong, I love my vet. I think vets, as any doctors, have roles in this society. But I'm getting a lot of people who will get a diagnosis and they want another opinion because they're not sure that that's the right avenue to go down. And that's what's important, that we have our own discernment, that we can open up and say, maybe there is another way. When I do readings quite often, I will ask the person, are you just taking this pet to the vet, or telling them, you should go for a checkup and get some of these tests done? There's always the acupuncturist, the chiropractor, the trainer. There are other professionals that I will get a hit on when I scan an animal's body and I feel the imbalance within the body, and go a little deeper and say, hey, this is what I'm feeling. So have that checked out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think it's in this case, it's like because of your knowledge, you can sense into what the pet and the pet owner
Right.
needs. But I also see that it's owners of pets have also a sense, though they don't know what to do with it, that um like, do I go for another biopsy? Well, what are they going to do with a further
Yeah.
biopsy? Like, the best they can do probably is give some form of chemo, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to give chemo. Then maybe, well, then that's it. So then what do? Leave your pet, or do you start going, well, I wonder if there's other ways of connecting,
Absolutely.
other insights into this dynamic? And that's the same movement that's happening with this great awakening. People are questioning the I don't want to say science, because I don't have anything against science, but the science, the misuse of science,
Mm-hmm.
that aspect. I think it's waking people up to realize that, wow, we can't just get our information from this one source, or it's like we really have active participants in this.
Right. I mean, perfect point. I agree with what you're saying. And it's part of what I do in education with people is to help them connect and bond and communicate on a different level. And I start off with the kind of daily keys, the things that people need. How do you awareness, really looking around awareness, and take you through exercising on that. Your perception, opening up your perception from that narrow view to going to a broader view. And then there's your intuition, helping people understand how they can tap into their own intuition. One of the most common calls I will get is for an aging pet or one that's been diagnosed as terminally ill. And they want to know when they think it's going to get close to that time.
Manon Bolliger here, and I want to thank you for taking actionable steps towards engaging your healing journey and helping others discover their path by watching, sharing, subscribing, and reviewing these podcasts. Every review and share helps spread the word, these different perspectives and choices and options for healing. And to thank you, I'd like to invite you to sign up to my free 7-sequence email tips on health and healing for everyday life. You can go to healerscafe.com tips. Thanks so much.
Is my pet ready? Is my pet in pain? And am I doing everything I need to do? Is there something more that I can do? Am I feeding the right food? Are they comfortable on their dog bed? Do they still want to go for a walk? Do they still want to be alive? And there's a lot of questions in there. And so helping them get the people get the tools of then, again, how do you discern what's right for you? Because your pet, lots of times, is just going to be looking with those puppy eyes or the cat smile, or even a horse who's going to put his head and nuzzle your, head on your shoulder, is here to help us. And it's one of the reasons that pets come into the world. It's, in my experience, we take pets into our life, but before you even came here, you made the choices. I want to experience this and I want to experience that. And a pet comes along and says, I'm going to help you with that. And they've been helping for thousands and thousands of years since they became domestic animals.
Interesting. Yeah. So you feel that part of the journey of the pet is to help humans.
It is. Very much so. And you just, our hearts open up when we look at newborn kittens, puppies, when we see foals running around. That is part of beauty of life. And when we see that and open up and we get all excited, our vibrations raise, our energy raises. And when you have those times that we all do, that we're down, we're depressed, something didn't go right that day, our pets have a tendency to come closer and closer into our energy field and to help us. And what do? We reach out and we bring them close to our hearts and heart to heart. Cats have purring energy. Their purrs are healing. I have patients who just listen. They've been long-term with a diagnosis, one man in particular, and that's what he listens to is cat purrs. He can no longer have that cat in his life. So he listens to the purrs and goes to sleep and really gets a good night's sleep listening to that vibration. And it's the same with a dog. The dog is loving you. And I feel my body going like this because it's like wagging their whole tail, their whole body. They're just so excited to see you. No matter what else happened in the world, they're right here for you. Their attention is on you. Unconditionally, that love door is open. As my girlfriend will say, I like having little love bombs that go out into the world and fill people's lives up, and that's the reason she has dogs in her world, so she can create love puppies, as she calls them.
Yeah, because I know in like physical healing, with pain, often they know exactly where to lay.
Right.
So it's an interesting, yeah, I just hadn't seen it from the concept that they're there to, yeah. So what has been the most, I don't know, eye-opening, or yeah, maybe one of the biggest experiences, either as a death doula or as any of your multitude of hats, shaman, healer, like what have you learned, or that you want to share, that usually it's something that surprises you a little bit, because otherwise you would notice it equally to everything else. So
Right. Right. I used to belong on the board of a local animal center. And at that time, the shelter itself was old, and they kept mother cats and kittens as far away as they could from the rest of the population. But disease and unwell was not great for the population of motherless cats or mother cats and kittens. So with the donations, we built a little maternity ward, as I would call it. It was a little shed with cages in, and it was only for kittens. That the kittens who were motherless most of the time came in the house with me, and I helped them through their early years and got very good at it. The other cats who came and either were pregnant and would have their babies there and then raise them and go at the right time back to the shelter for their forever homes. But the motherless kittens, as I said, they're the challenge when you have kittens or puppies or any animal that is newborn and maybe a day or two old, and then they lose their mother for whatever reason, whether it's human or whether it's nature, it's very hard to raise those animals to a point where they're self-sufficient. And I remember when I was in part of my shamanic training, I had these 6 beautiful motherless kittens, and they were extremely tiny, and they were doing well. They were, I had another cat we called him Uncle Squirty Poo Pie was his name. He's like a whole story in himself, but he loved the motherless kittens, and he would come and wash them from nose to tail, and he would help me with these kittens. But this particular litter of kittens really were starting to thrive until they didn't. And one by one, I held them in my hands as they passed away. And I was in tears. I just couldn't understand. Why did they come to me and then pass on? And it just so happened, there's no coincidence or anything. And I had the shaman that I was working with gave me a call, and he said, "What's wrong?" And I was like, in sobs. I said, I've lost these kittens, all of them. Why did they come to me and die? And he just very quietly sat back. I say sat back, I couldn't see him on the phone at that time. But he just went, "Why wouldn't they come to you and die? You hold such a loving, compassionate space. And in that time that they were with you, their life was so full to overflowing. And you've learned how to hold that space, not only for them, but for others." And turning that picture around made the difference for me when I work with people who are getting ready to pass and do shamanic journey work, especially people who might be in a coma, who are hanging on for a while. I help them with the resolution, but also with animals who are getting ready to pass, knowing that I can hold that loving, compassionate space for them to transition from one life to the other. And I know that life is eternal. Just because a soul passes from this life to another doesn't mean they aren't still with you. And so that was a huge aha moment for me.
And how did I'm sorry, this is now my my other part of the brain goes, well, is there an explanation why they would each die? Like,
Absolutely. There is.
not
There
to
is.
get away from your story because it's quite incredible. But yeah, so what was it?
Well, it happens to human animals as well as, it's the fading infant syndrome. So it's the fading cat syndrome or the fading puppy syndrome. And that's the same of any mammal who doesn't have that mother love and comfort that should be with them for 24/7, that they're missing that bond and that connection until they get to be an older age and independent of themselves. So as one starts to fade away, the chances are the others are going to pick up on that same energy and start to say, okay, we're going to leave too. And as you dwindle in numbers, of course, it's not impossible. And I've had where we had a kitten who ended up living with us called Peanutty. And that's what happened to the rest of his family, is they had passed, but him. And so he said, no, I like it here. I like these people. I like Uncle Squirty. I'm going to stay. And he did. He very much did.
Yeah. And so these would have been how old, the kittens? How long were they with you before they passed?
Oh, they were only days old when they came.
Okay.
So I would say within a week and a week and a half, that's when things really, it's the shock is over. They're being fed, they're being cared for. And once that shock kind of wears off, then it's like the realization there is the pull between one life and another that happens. It's the veil of the curtain. And whether you decide the choice to step through it as Peanutty did and say, nah, I'm going to live this life here, or whether you decide that, no, I'm going back to source and I'll come back another time. That's part of life. That's part of the cycle.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, oh my goodness, our time has gone by. So but I was going to say, do you have any words of wisdom or anything you would like to sort of end in the next 3-4 minutes, just to give give your heart to this community?
I would tell you that even some of your darkest days, whether you share your life with a pet or whether you just have a place in nature that fills your heart with beauty, when it's hard for you to take a step or take a breath, start appreciating, start being gratitude, and envision in your mind, imagine that pet space, that person space, that place in beauty that really fills you up. And then you can start to breathe. You can lower down your shoulders, but the more breath that you can get in, the more you can move forward. Then you're actually going to start moving forward in life. And just take that time to go, wow, what was it about that situation that I needed to go through? And once you take a look at it and decide, no, that's no longer true for me, I'm not going to do that anymore, your world starts to change because you looked at the world in a different way. And you'll open up to more coming your way.
Great. Well, thank you very much for sharing your wisdom and your passion for this work. And
thank you. It's my honor and my pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café with Manon Bolliger. Continue your healing journey by visiting thehealerscafe.com and her website, and discover how to listen to your body and reboot for optimal health.